Welcome to the Soul Story Show, where real conversations and soulful stories help you live and write your next chapter. I'm your host, Brooke-Sidney Harbour, and today's guest is a literary force. Gwenda Bond is the best-selling author behind books like Mr. and Mrs. Witch, Not Your Average Hot Guy, and Lois Lane Fallout. And she's also the powerhouse who penned Stranger Things, Suspicious Minds, the first official novel based on the Stranger Things Netflix series. Her latest book, The Frame Up, is a sexy, sharp art heist thriller set in a magical underworld filled with cons, secrets, and second chances. Today, we're diving into that story, her creative process, and the soul behind the suspense. Please welcome to the show, Gwenda Bond.
Hi, thanks so much for having me on. And
so
and my cat and my dog.
It's perfect. We've got all the magical creatures with us right now.
Yes, we do.
Totally great. So I love to begin kind of with our soul story, which is kind of the thread that runs through your life. Mm-hmm. If you had to describe your soul story, which led you to becoming the writer you are today, what would it be?
I usually say I'm that weirdo that knew I always wanted to write. Like before I could even write, I would make like loops on paper and ask my parents when they came home exhausted from work, like, did I make something? So I always loved stories. Both of my parents were always very encouraging of creativity, and they were actually principals in my tiny small town. My dad was my elementary school principal and my mom was my high school principal. And so I also joke that I came by my authority issues early and often. And so I think just that creativity was always a way for me to feel like I could define myself rather than be defined by who my parents were in my small town.
That's great. So do you feel like you always knew you were going to be a writer? You always knew this was the only career for you?
You know, I did get a journalism degree, but I thought that's because that's how writers made money.
I have one of those, yeah.
I mean, oh, how times change, but I do still love Lois Lane and journalism. And I don't regret that at all, because it did teach me a lot about writing on deadline, and I love journalism still to this day. But I thought, well, fiction writing, you know, I'll obviously never make a living doing that, and yet somehow it worked out. So I feel very grateful about that. Yeah.
So let's turn to The Frame Up, which is your latest book. And for those who haven't read it yet, how would you describe it?
So it is a magical art heist story set in a world that's not that different from our own, except that there is magic that is hidden from most people, and in this book is mostly used to commit crimes.
I know, I love that. So where did the spark for the story come from? Like, what inspired this mix of like art heist, magical cons, and there's also a lot of emotional tension?
Yeah, so I always have tended to write for my obsessions. One of the things that I always tell young writers who are having trouble landing on stories is, you know, what are the things you're automatically interested in? What are the things that if you're flipping around on a TV or you're scrolling through Netflix and you see a documentary about, you're just like, yeah, I'm going to watch this. And you have a million books about it on your shelf already. Like there's probably something there that can be a story. And I have always loved museums and art and stories of art thefts. And I've always loved heist stories. And so I really, it started, I knew I wanted to do an art heist. I had an idea that there's a painting that's more than a painting, but I needed kind of more elements, like who would the thieves be? So the thing that I did actually that's a little unusual for this book, because heists are such a structure challenge, I watched about 50 heist movies. I made a list of every heist movie that I already liked and a bunch of ones that were classics that I hadn't seen. And I just started watching them and making kind of mental notes about what I liked and what I didn't like. And I think a lot of times when you have elements like that, you could start to react against them and your brain makes
Mm.
connections. And so that was kind of the starting point. And then once Danny, I started thinking about her having this power that she has. That's the main character, who, when she's a kid, discovers that if she draws or copies something, even if it's not very good, in reality, it is perceived as the original. And then I wanted to write a complicated parent story for her because
Mm.
I'm very close with my mom. I've written a lot of great parent relationships. So I wanted to challenge myself to do one that was a little more dysfunctional.
I love it. And this one is dysfunctional and also fun and magical in many different ways. But let's go back to Danny Poussaint. I hope I'm
Yeah.
pronouncing that
Yep.
correctly. Danny Poussaint is like a woman that we can all relate to because she's very bold. I thought she was clever, but more importantly, she was very complicated.
Yeah.
And we all come from complicated, usually families, but hers has this whole like legendary magical crime family. Like, how did you figure that out? I know you wanted some dysfunction, but like this level and layers was really
Well,
interesting.
well, yeah, I do love, I mean, to me, character is plot and structure and story. And so Danny is very much a character that has been defined by her childhood, by the choices that she made, and by what she feels were mistakes that she made. And I mean, I think we can all relate to like things we wish we'd done differently, relationships we wish we'd handled differently. And we're not always right about those things. Sometimes it worked out as it was meant to. And so I wanted to do a real second chance story where Danny has a second chance at kind of the life she might have stayed in had she not like sort of been on the run from her own past. Like she doesn't really have to be alone. She ostracizes herself as kind of a
Mhm.
self-punishment and has been out just doing enough jobs that she can make ends meet, stay right. And she kind of tries to target people who deserve a
Right.
takedown, which is something I always love in a heist story. I mean, I do think heist stories are unusual in that we often root for the criminals in them. So you want the criminals to be doing something sympathetic.
That's very true. And I think that's part of the interesting part of this book, and I think fiction, and we're exploring this fascinating kind of morality layer, right?
Yeah.
Who gets to define what's right and wrong, especially when there's magic
Yeah.
and there's crime involved. So, what questions were you thinking about or asking yourself about justice or redemption while writing the story?
Well, absolutely. Like, whenever people ask me, like, what painting I would steal, I'm like, actually, I can much more easily tell you what heist I would stop. Like,
Right, right, exactly.
because in general, I'm not a fan of the idea of stealing art. However, the art world itself is very morally fraught. Like the commercial world of fine art and how it's used to shelter assets and like one of the things that I found out in the research for this is a lot of times paintings these days will be stolen so that they can be used to barter for someone's release from jail.
Oh,
And of
wow.
course, like we saw during the crypto era, and like there have been several New York Times stories this year, like speculation in that market can then end up backfiring on artists. A lot of times, artists who get famous later may be in poverty and they really see no benefit from their works taking off. So, I think it's a very morally complex thing. And also, for every piece of art that's in a museum, there's a lot that are in private homes, private collections where people don't get to see them necessarily. And they are just kind of there as almost like a visual prop. So I think that even though I don't condone the theft of art, there are certainly a lot of rich characters involved in that world, like as it exists in our reality. And of course, in the book, the collection that is being targeted is owned by, let's just say, a really bad rich guy.
Right, right.
A really bad rich guy who's basically been using it for just to get more wealthy. One of the things that I wanted to do in this is kind of take everything that we normally get in a heist story and use the magic to complicate it. And so I think that that's often true in the art world. And like in a heist story, everyone's powers are almost magical usually anyway. So it's just kind of a heightened way to have fun with those things.
I love the complexity of it. And you're right. Like we're kind of rooting for obviously the painting to get stolen and all of the different things. And, so I want to encourage everyone to read the book. So, I want to give away a little bit, but not too much.
Yeah.
Another, I feel like big theme is betrayal. I feel like it played a really huge role in this story, like the betrayal of trust, maybe even institutions, betrayal within families.
Yeah.
And that kind of pain can truly shape a person as much as love does.
Yeah.
What were you thinking when you were exploring this theme of betrayal? And how do you think it helped reveal who Dani really is?
Well, I think that Dani makes a choice when she's 16, which, gosh, none of us should really be held all that accountable for choices we make when we're 16. And she does it because she thinks that it will protect her mother, because she is sympathetic. Of course, she loves her mother. And her mother is a very complicated, very abrasive and manipulative person. Now that said, she also has like obviously this crew that are very loyal to her.
Right.
She's very well known. She's known as the best burglar. Like I can say this because we find out early in the story, but it turns out she's actually the one behind the Gardner heist. And so, and there's a magic world reason, for why it wasn't discovered. And I tried to put as many of those kinds of Easter eggs in as possible. But also the history of the Passant family.
Right.
And those women, like I've had a couple people joke that this is like a fun beach read about intergenerational patriarchal trauma. And it's sort of true.
Right. Like in a really big, heavy way, but in a fun, magical way, honestly told through this
right
story.
But there definitely is like a grappling with the patriarchy, and we see some flashbacks to the period in France when a lot of women actually were going there to paint because the academies had started to admit women finally to do the same kind of training as men, which was like way late in coming. And we of course have a guy who is painted who is not precisely human. And
more than meets the eye.
Is sinister, and who is a sinister force for all of these women, and really has, created this kind of trauma that is passed on from generation to generation in Dani's family, and that she kind of finally gets to break with a little bit, or a chance to break with.
Yeah, I know I don't want to give it away either, but behind, I feel like some of that betrayal is trust or the lack of trust. Like a lot of these themes to me really went together really well. Like they're layered so well and so realistic, even though it's in this magical sense. Yeah. So, whether it's trust in family, trust in lovers, trust in yourself, how do you think Dani's struggle with trust mirrors real life challenges?
Oh, well, I do think it's very realistic. I think a lot of times if we've told ourselves a story about who we are, which in Dani's case, she very much has.
Right.
And she really has no one around her to challenge what she's telling herself, by design, because that's a protective thing. So when she's forced to kind of rebuild these relationships or question the way that she perceives herself and the story that she's telling about herself, I think that's a very difficult thing. And in a way, it's almost more about like her lack of self-trust is eroded by her past. And I think part of the story is that she grows to really trust like who she is and the decisions that she makes. And to give other people some grace as well, and the ability for them to change. And so I think like really it's the story of her learning how to build connections in a more honest way. But of course, it's never easy. So I do think that's a very relatable story. I think a lot of us go through periods of life where we isolate ourselves to protect,
Mhm.
and it never really works out. But connection is scary, and knowing who to trust can be scary.
That's so true. And we often do build like worlds within ourselves based on kind of our beliefs about ourselves. And sometimes they're formed as young as that's why I thought this novel was very
Yes.
powerful. They're formed very young. They're formed early, and we attribute meaning to things where our young brains probably, if we were to tell ourselves that at 30 or 40, we're like, that's not really what it meant. So I thought that that was so honest and so truthful about, how we all form a lot of beliefs about ourselves, about love, family, and
Yeah.
all the things that you really delve into in this book. But now I want to like turn to, because we're talking about connection and we're
Yeah.
talking about relationships. I kind of want to turn to some of the love
Mhm.
aspects in the book, because the chemistry in the book is off the chart, right? There, it's not just sparks. I mean, we have history, we have
Yeah.
betrayal, we have a real emotional risk between Danny and Elliot.
Yeah.
What made you want to explore a love story with that much heat and heartbreak?
Well, I mean, for me, like it was always kind of there, and it's funny because to me, like they are very. There's a very a sweetness to that
Mhm.
relationship, and it always surprises me when people are rooting for that because there's not really a love triangle, but there
Right.
is another person who's interested in Danny,
Mhm.
and who under different circumstances she might be interested in. But to me, it's that thing of there being people in your life that are family, and even so, it can get complicated because you may not be communicating like you should. You may lose trust because you misperceive something. So to me, they really are just another mirror of kind of like Danny's whole life, and like not being able to see how people feel. She's not able to see herself clearly at the
Right.
beginning of the book, and she's not able to see other people clearly either because of that. She
That
expects them to see her the same way that she's seeing herself, and I mean, I think that's something that we really can all relate to because I feel like we're often way more critical of ourselves than other people, tend to be.
that's true. Well, you know what I think is
Except on
interesting,
the internet. Except on the internet.
except on the internet.
There
Exactly.
people are just critical of everyone.
Exactly. And, kind of like speaking of the internet, now we're in this thing where it's like, an X is an X for a reason and like all these little memes, but yet I think everyone loves a good second chance story.
Yeah,
And this book is about second chances, like with
it is.
love, with
Yeah,
your purpose, even with friendships and family, and
yeah.
even with power. What second chances in your own life helped you to shape
Ooh.
this kind of emotional heart of the book?
Well, it's funny actually because, I feel like, it's funny because my second chance sort of came on the heels of this book. Like,
I love
I
that.
had a long time relationship breakup. Like, I got divorced, and it
Mhm.
was kind of a surprise, and it was a terrible year. It was like the year my dad died. Like, all
Mhm.
of this was kind of going on in the lead up to this book coming out, and then when I was finishing it. And so, yeah, I was then launched right into writing a couple of romances that I'm finishing now, and that was rough. It's like, what do I and like one of the main characters that's set in like a Regency England, and she's kind of like hates marriage, and it's like maybe she's right. But then I healed a little bit,
Right.
and I'm happy to say like I met someone on an app, which never happens. It was wonderful.
Oh,
And we've been together almost a year now. So I do really think that like there are second chances if you stay open to things, and it was a bad place, and now I'm in a really good place. So and I do think like it's definitely that will be even more of a thing
mhm.
in my next couple books.
Yeah.
Like, but because everything we go through is something that we learn and bring to our work. Whether you want to or not, it's gonna
That's
end
so
up in
true.
there.
And I think that's the fun part of writing and the fun parts of books, because like there's nothing is wasted.
Yeah,
Nothing at
absolutely.
all.
Yeah.
So I feel like this is a question that I had when I was reading the book as I started thinking about, I have an 11-year-old son. So I started thinking about a lot of our gifts. So something powerful to me in the story is the idea of magic as both a
Mm.
gift
Mm.
and a burden. Like
Yeah.
Danny even wonders many times if life would be easier without her powers. And I think
Mhm.
that really mirrors how some of us feel about our own unique gifts in life. I
Yeah.
think about even my son as he's trying to figure out his gifts. But they set us apart, or sometimes the gifts can make things harder. How did you want readers to reflect on the idea of personal magic or inner gifts through this story?
Oh, that's so interesting. I would love to hear you talk more about that. So maybe this will spark something. That's fascinating. I think that for sure, what I definitely did not want to do was have the magic solve all the problems.
Good. Yeah.
And so pretty early on, one of the decisions I made about this book was that the heist itself and the heist itself and the characters would have to work both within the fabric of our rules. So there's like law enforcement authorities and security systems and all the things that would normally be in place and in our world. And then there's also the magic world and its rules.
Yeah.
So by making them have to pull this off within both sets of parameters, I think part of the goal is to make it more difficult. And I do think in life sometimes it can make it more difficult if you really know what your path is,
Mhm.
because there will always be obstacles in the way, and it can be difficult to get. It can be frustrating. I mean, I always knew I wanted to be a writer, but I had a day job in government for 17 years. I mean, I wrote on the side for a long time.
Wow.
And then when I finally did sell a book, I then, published quite a number like pretty quickly. But it was really like an overnight success, many years in the making. And I think that's often the case.
Right.
Yeah.
It often looks that way when you finally,
Yeah.
get the light
Have a
shined
great
on you, but
crew.
you've been working the whole
Yeah.
time.
Yes.
I think it's really fascinating because we live in a world where I feel like purpose and gifts are attached always to dollars.
Yeah.
And now in, the rise of the internet, my son's growing up obviously in this time frame, everything is very public. And as you're saying, everything looks like an instant success.
Yeah.
And so it's hard sometimes to even want some of the maybe more quiet or maybe less cool because he's very interested in science and math and
Oh, that's
he
great.
actually wants to be an astronaut. So or end up
I
in
love
aerospace.
that.
Right. But in the world of where, hey, you're tall, you should be a basketball player, or hey, you're this, right?
Mm.
So I just think it's interesting that in this book, she had magic, which we all want, especially from like the Harry Potter days.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
even
yeah.
that's like when people were able, I'm blanking on the character that the Wizard in the Oz, where she was able to click her heels and like
Yeah,
things
yeah, yeah.
happen, right? Like we've been in love with magic for so long,
Yeah.
but I think this book really, for me, it brought up the question of the magic as a gift and the burden. So I really appreciated like the way that you explored that here.
Oh, thank
Um,
you. Thank you. Yeah, you never want it to, I mean, the characters have to struggle, so
right,
it can't be all good.
right. It's so true. Okay, so now for all the people that are like writers or dream writers that also have similar goals. And, I feel like you're very talented. You write in multiple genres, young adult, adult fantasy,
Mhm.
romance, thrillers. What's
Mhm.
your writing process like? And how do you decide what story to tell next?
Well, it depends on the book, like the process changes,
Okay.
but in general, I think a book, I do quite a bit of thinking about it up front. Usually, sometimes a book just comes.
Right.
That rarely happens though. Sometimes you have like little seeds of an idea and you just kind of like start thinking about them and I guess sort of let them accumulate mass. Some books are easier to figure out than others. And I do think process evolves. Like, I think I'm better at having a sense of what I need and of what is a story and what interests me in a story now. And when I first started out, I frequently like scrapped whole books and would rewrite them. So I do think like I learned a lot like along the way. And one thing that I always tell people is like, I mean, write what you want to write, what your passion is. Don't write what you think you should want to write, because I think you have to really like tell the stories that really only you can tell. I think that's what still people want and people connect to. Um, first and foremost in art, in this complicated era that we're in, like that authentic, someone is showing you how they view the world through every story. And figuring it out for themselves. That's part of why I write. But I also think like when you first start out, you don't really know how to revise and edit. And you don't realize it's a different skill. And so I was always really good at being able to, partly because I started out getting serious about writing, looking at screenplays, which are so fluid and require so much rewriting. And if you're very good at imagining a bunch of different ways a story can go, you can end up revising endlessly and just making something different instead of making it better. And better is this, better version of the story you want to tell, not like some empiric thing.
Right.
So I think like that's my biggest part of my process, is trying to figure out, what is it about this story that I want to tell? What are the things that would make it a different story, or that would make it not mine? And then I do quite a lot of not necessarily a full outline up front, but at some point I will do a full outline.
Okay. So are you like a plotter or a pantser, or like some mix?
When I mix, I mean, and I think everybody's kind of a mix. But I really, because I did some work with other people's intellectual property, the Lois Lane books especially, I really had to learn how to outline before writing the book in a way that was not just made it like that, it had to reflect. Because if you're doing IP and the outline is approved, and then you go off and write something totally different, sure, it might work out okay, or they might be like, this isn't what we agreed for you to write. So it protects you and the project if you actually can figure out what you want to do with it up front. And so I really kind of brought that back into my own practice. So I tend not to do quite as detailed, because usually unless it's IP, the publisher doesn't want to see that detailed of an outline, even if you're selling in advance. But I like to know where the roadmap, because I don't always trust myself when I sit down to draft, but I trust past me to be like, well, this seemed like a good idea, when I was outlining. And if something better comes along, then I'll just toss out the outline. But if I get stuck, then I'll go back to the outline, and usually it turns out that it was there, it was there for a reason.
Right. What was the hardest part of writing the frame up?
I mean, honestly, just all the moving parts of, I mean, in a lot of ways, just like the technical plot requirements, the puzzle aspect, while trying to keep things moving are hard in that, like that was a real challenge with that book, and something that I wanted to challenge myself to do.
I loved it. Well, you succeeded. And I think because it was so complicated, I think it made the reader even want to keep reading more, like as we got little details. So I'm encouraging everyone to get the book. Now, shifting to this book, you've created a lot of magical worlds, and then you even wrote Stranger Things, Suspicious Minds, the first official novel for the whole Netflix phenomenon. So it's a prequel.
Yeah.
What was it like to write a prequel for like this wildly loved and already established universe? Speaking of like
Yeah.
screenplays and television.
Yeah. Well, it was such a treat. I've been really lucky. So I think the Lois Lane books, I would have been very intimidated to go into this had I not had the Lois Lane books under my belt. And those were such a good experience, like just in terms of the writing of them. And I was given lots of freedom. And they were very supported and got a really nice reception. And so, you're always nervous if you're writing in a world that other people already love and are invested in.
Right.
And my thing is, I'll get asked to write an IP, and I will say no if I don't feel like I can bring something to it. But so when they approached me about writing this book, like really this will be about Eleven's mom. It'll be set during, it'll be a period piece, kind of like the first like the series itself, and we want it to you to have freedom to make it your own. And so they really were true to that. And we went back and forth and deciding on outline, but they definitely let me put my own stamp on it. And I got to kind of like at that point the show actually addressed this itself, but at that point my one frustration as a fan of Stranger Things was that it's always the boys on bike genre and there's one girl. And so I really did want to kind of have it be a friendship based gang, because I think that's the core of Stranger Things, but have it be like gender reversed. And so that's really like, because that to me is like, I have a kind of a track record of writing very strong, complicated female characters at the center of a story. And so I wanted Terry to be as someone we could really root for and love as much as 11. And just to bring in like all of that texture of it's set in the late 60s. And so I went back and read, like the Duffer Brothers and I are roughly the same age, and so we obviously like grew up loving a lot of the same things.
Right.
And I went back and read like Stephen King's first books, and kind of like I've sort of jokingly refer to that book as my early Stephen King novel, because I wanted it to have that kind of texture.
That's so good. Okay. So, you have all these different genres under your belt, and I think you said you might be doing some more romance. So what's
Yeah.
next for you? Is there
I'm
a
actually so
sequel?
I'm working on 2 books at the moment, which are a little overdue because of that whole life implosion I mentioned earlier.
Right.
But hopefully will be out next year. They're both nearing the finish line. One is an old Hollywood screwball comedy, sort of influenced, but with some darkness. Time travel story. Um,
That sounds good
I'm a
already.
real big old Hollywood aficionado, and it's set during the Blacklist era. Um, and just kind of randomly ended up, it was like, well, this is too good not to use. It ended up the thing I was pegging the period on, like, was filming within a couple like months of all of the worst of the Hollywood Blacklist period.
Right.
And it just feels like there's a lot that can say about our current moment. And then the other one is going to be my first book under the pen name Gemma Bowen, because I finally have gone so far outside my lane. Everyone's like, this should be an open pen name. But it's kind of a magic infused Bridgerton era story with sort of gods and monsters. And the first one's a retelling of the Taming of the Shrew, and there'll be 3 books about 3 sisters who start an apothecary business together, who are witches. So I'm having a lot of fun with that one.
I love that because I was a big fan back in the day of like Charmed.
Oh, well,
So
so that was my editor and I were totally talking about Charm
yes.
when we were in the early stages of this book.
So I'm super excited for that. So you've built this beautiful and loyal readership. What do you hope readers walk away with after reading the frame up?
I hope that they take away the basically the idea that our stories are always evolving, and that we can make decisions at any point that will change the trajectory of where we're going, um, and that sometimes it's okay if things don't work out. Like sometimes it's okay to let a bad relationship go and to choose a different path for yourself.
I love that. Now we have what I love to do is close kind of with a fun lightning round. So I want you just to think of, it's like 5 questions. So just think of the first thing or give the first thing that comes to mind. So what is your favorite writing ritual or must have?
Coffee.
Gosh, yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. The last book that blew your mind.
The last book that blew my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, let's see. I just read something that this is what happens when you read too much. I mean, I'm reading Sarah McLean's Summer Storms right now, which is great. The last book that blew my mind was, oh my gosh, why am I blanking on? See, this is what happens when you ask a writer questions about books. But no, I think These Summer Storms is like Sarah McLean doing something totally different, like doing a contemporary, and it's really good.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
One magical power you'd actually want in real life.
Ooh, teleportation.
No
airplanes.
No airplanes, no cars.
No airplanes, beach whenever you want it.
And you may have alluded to this answer. Your dream art piece to steal in a magical heist.
Oh, my dream art piece to steal. I feel like it should be like steal it back from someone else. Yes. Like whatever, I don't know what would be the one that's unrecovered, but if I could figure out where it was, it would be to steal something back and return it to a museum. I don't want to steal the art, but I just want the art to be free.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. If Danny had a theme song or the Frame Up had a theme song, what would it be?
Oh gosh. Oh, that's a fun one. Look at me not remembering. I mean, I did a soundtrack for that. Like I did a soundtrack for the book that's on Spotify, and I'm still blanking. I feel like it would be something from Eartha Kitt that's just like slinky and cool.
That's right.
Like from one of those French albums, like like as a nod to sort of the sections of the book in France.
And we'll definitely have to link that Spotify playlist. That would be fun.
Hang on, I'm gonna come up with one. Let's see here. C'est Bon. Let's do C'est Bon by Eartha Kitt. Yeah.
Well, Gwenda, thank you for sharing your story, your insight, and your soulful imagination with us. In the Frame Up, you gave us an incredible character who we can all relate to, who's messy, magical, and utterly unforgettable. And through Danny's journey, we're all reminded that our gifts, even the complicated ones, are worth embracing. To everyone watching or listening, grab a copy of the Frame Up and follow Gwenda on Instagram, Blue Sky, her Substack newsletter, or wherever you get your magical book news. Her links are going to be all in the description. And if this episode stirs something inside of you and you know there's a story waiting to be written, head over to Brooke-Sidneybooks.com and schedule your free book chat with me. I'm your host, Brooke-Sidney Harbour, and this is the Soul Story Show. Real conversations, soulful stories. Your next chapter starts here.